What up, my fellow NBA lovers? This is your guy, Marcellus Ease. And this recent disappointing Rockets season, the end of it pretty much marks the end of a phenomenon that's been going on around the league the past 4 to 5 years, in which we've seen a flux of guys coming through many NBA front offices with no scouting history, no history of playing in the league, and just off of pure analytics. A lot of these guys come from Stanford, MIT, and their word is almost gold above other guys who's had plenty of coaching history or just history in being in front offices or just understanding the NBA. Now, a lot of these guys have been holding on to Daryl Morey as their Morpheus God type figure in this analytics-only driven teams. In the past couple of seasons, we've seen that this formula just actually does not work. Many former NBA champions have even stated, going deep in the playoffs, you're playing against a bunch of smart defensive teams where guys make major adjustments, and you have to come with 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 mini adjustments in the playoffs. You can't just do the same thing over and over again. Now, Mike D'Antoni does have his own system, but it's possible in this scenario that Mike D'Antoni has actually been forced to use so much analytics, even his system would have to go down the drain. As Daryl Morey has made many adjustments, and just this small ball approach this particular season has not really worked out for him. You guys check out this segment, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
You and I both like so much personally, but what do you think of his job security in Houston right now?
Well, the Houston Rockets for the last 3 years have gone downhill. 2 years ago, they were in the conference finals, almost in the finals had Chris Paul not gotten hurt.
Now that right there, Chris Paul not gotten hurt. He's talking about, I believe, the 2018 second round in which the Warriors had defeated the Houston Rockets, and Chris Paul the last 2 games in that 7-game series, he actually didn't play because he had a hamstring issue. Now, when that series had started, Andre Iguodala, he also got hurt. But in the first 2 games in which Iguodala was playing, that Golden State was fully rostered, no injuries, they were sweeping them boys. As soon as Andre got hurt, that whole series flipped. And then ever since then, they've been holding on to this excuse that if had Chris Paul hamstring never been injured or whatever, had he played, they would have eliminated the Warriors. And that's not even the case.
Last year eliminated in the second round against the Warriors. A great opponent, but Durant got hurt in that series. They couldn't take advantage of it.
And that right there is the end of the Houston Rockets. That right there. The fact that Kevin Durant went down, and as we all know, because they paid so many guys to be on that team, that Golden State had a very thin bench. The fact that KD went down, it was only CP3, Harden versus Klay Thompson and Curry, and they actually went down back-to-back games. That right there showed you it was over right there. That Houston Rockets analytical only approach is done. Now, analytics should be the tool. It shouldn't be the main thing used. Golden State definitely uses analytics, but they have a very, I would say, diverse pedigree of just guys coming in. They play offense, they play defense. These guys are well-versed. You got Steve Kerr with so much history throughout being in the league, as a player, GM, executive, and even got the way Golden State was constructed by Jerry West. Very good player throughout his career, and one of the most successful GMs, possibly the most successful GM of all time, is Jerry West. So Jerry West has a vastly understanding of the game, but Daryl Morey, he's not a basketball player. He's just a MIT guy, and once again, they're holding on to this only analytical approach, saying that the data tells us this, the data tells us that. But these things tend to not work when it comes to playoff basketball, when the referees are tucking in their whistles.
This year, they go all in with this roster, and they go out 4-1, and they've won fewer games each season. They're not trending in the right direction. So there's always going to be pressure on the general manager, whether it's his fault or not. And that's a situation that is developing in Houston.
Now, I'm going to replay this again to show you everything that Brian Windhorst has said, because it's basically a downhill effect.
What do you think of his job security in Houston right now?
Well, the Houston Rockets for the last 3 years have gone downhill. 2 years ago, they were in the conference finals, almost in the finals had Chris Paul not gotten hurt. Last year eliminated in the second round against the Warriors. A great opponent, but Durant got hurt in that series. They couldn't take advantage of it. This year, they go all in with this roster, and they go out 4-1, and they've won fewer games each season. They're not trending in the right direction. So there's always going to be pressure on the general manager, whether it's his fault or not. And that's a situation that is developing in Houston.
Coach McHale, obviously you're familiar with this Houston Rockets organization. If you're in Daryl Morey's position right now, what would you do with this roster moving forward?
I would have to go to a couple of big guys that are very versatile, can guard, you can switch, you can do a lot of stuff that Mike D'Antoni likes to do, but you just have a next level guy there that just is just bigger. They were.
See, this right here, you could tell from his reaction, he just don't know what they can do. The question is finding a big guy that's going to accept Daryl Morey's system, the analytically very driven system. That's going to be the major issue. I mean, the only big guys I could think that they can get off minimum is guys like Dwight Howard. That's if he wants to go back to Houston.
15-10 after they traded Clint Capella, and they really, they went small ball and they won the first round. It was they had a dogfight with Oklahoma City, but I don't know. I'm not sold totally on it. I just think that going as small as they did just isn't going to work. They need 2 or 3 guys who are the 6'8", 6'9", 6'10", long athletic guys that can just dribble handoffs, do some stuff. But when you roll to the rim with those guys, there's always the threat of the lob dump. They can finish at the basket. They didn't run a lot of pick and roll after Capella left, but they had nobody that could even finish at the basket. You saw times there where their guards were going up against LeBron and up against AD, and they just couldn't finish around the basket. So I just got to believe they got to find some bigger players that can play their style.
Yeah, that right there, they basically hand-strapped Mike D'Antoni for his last season. I give Mike D'Antoni that. I mean, Daryl Morey didn't give him nothing to work with. They just went straight off of data. You can just tell. The fact that they really thought that this team can go far, even though that they knew the Lakers, which was going to be one of the teams that they would have to beat to get over that hump to get to the finals, is built long and athletic. It's just a long athletic team. To just go with a small guys, it just doesn't make any sense. Especially knowing that information ahead of time. It's not like the Lakers made mid-trades, mid-season to change their team to the way it is now.
Coach Mitchell, looking at Russ and looking at James Harden, obviously 2 former MVPs who are still at the top of their game. Are these 2 pieces that you can...
Are they really at the top of their game? That's the real question. Because Houston's made a lot of changes throughout the years, but the one variable that remains consistent is James Harden. And they're going to really have to ask themselves a hard question. There's only one guy that they stayed committed to, whether CP3 had a falling out because of personality. They stuck with James Harden. Same thing with Dwight Howard. And now it's just not working out with Russell Westbrook, which is probably the worser options out of all these scenarios. But they're really going to have to ask themselves, the guy that they're committed to, is it even worth it?
Win with in this league?
Absolutely. Those 2 guys can get you 60 and about 20 assists a night. Look, Max said it. They're going to have to find some look. Mike D'Antoni kind of alluded to it. He said the Lakers played small ball. Well, they had Anthony Davis, who's 6'11", 7 foot, who's athletic. LeBron James, who's 6'9", 240. So I don't know, but if the Houston Rockets can find, you're not going to find those 2 guys, obviously, but you can find guys of that build, that height, that stature. You may not be as good an athlete as LeBron and AD, but have those attributes. So there's some tweaking and things that they can do. But the thing that I'm impressed with Westbrook.
You know, it's crazy. Even trying to find those guys that are 6'9", 6'10", like the same type of build that he's describing right here. It's going to be hard for Houston to even find those type of guys because it's hard enough for teams right now with the new max salary to just build a team around one player that has that max salary. But to have Russell Westbrook and James Harden making over $45 million to 2023, and then to have all that salary committed to Eric Gordon off the bench, which he's on the decline, it's going to be hard to build around that.
And it tells you about him. He talked about Coach D'Antoni, not the coaching part, but they seem to respect Mike D'Antoni. If I'm the Houston Rockets and I'm Daryl Morey, you got to take that into a strong consideration because anytime your players respect the guy that's leading them and then they respect his basketball IQ, before you let that guy walk out the door, you better consider that because Westbrook and Harden is owed a lot of money in the next 3 or 4 years. So you better make sure they're on the same page with the next coach if you don't stay with Mike D'Antoni.
Yeah, they are. Over the next 3 seasons, the number is $265 million owed to those 2 players alone. That's not including everybody. Taking a look at Mike D'Antoni's resume, he was outstanding, leading Houston to the playoffs 4 different times, 2 appearances in the second round, a Western Conference Finals appearance. You know, during his time in the league, the NBA, I mean, the Rockets led the NBA in points per game, 3 points made, 3 points attempted, and
You know, Mike D'Antoni, he falls in the line of one of these coaches that he's gonna get another job, but he's one of these coaches that he's really good for an owner that loves to sell tickets during the regular season. That's struggling to get sales, struggling to get attraction. He can get guys to play a good brand of basketball that's very watchable. But during the postseason, he's just not that guy. I think he's proven it throughout the years. He's had Steve Nash. He had that team in Phoenix. He had Kobe Bryant, Dwight Howard in his prime. Steve Nash, it couldn't work there. Then he had all these assets in Houston, having James Harden. The league's rules was actually catered towards a player like James Harden. To have Dwight Howard with James Harden, then James Harden with CP3, then James Harden and Westbrook, none of these things worked. So it is what it is.
for second in win percentage. D'Antoni has been reported to receive some interest from teams like the Pacers and Sixers. So with that being said, I bring in my basketball experts, GA and 3D. Greg, starting with you, why didn't this marriage in Houston work with D'Antoni?
That's because they didn't even really commit to him. That's why. I mean, Houston has had a new owner in recent years, and he's dumped a lot of guys. He dumped a lot of Mike D'Antoni's staff. He didn't want to pay those guys. He's gotten very cheap. He's one of the cheapest owners to come in the league in recent history. And especially with this pandemic, he's lost a lot of money in his casinos and hotels. But other than that, they don't really seem that committed. And he doesn't seem like he believes in this analytical driven team so much.
Well, first of all, I think it did work. I mean, they had a lot of success there. In fairness, I never understood how you could blame a team for not being.
Once again, it did work. It worked in the regular season, but the goal is to get that championship. Mike D'Antoni, especially this system, this one-way analytically driven team, is just not going to work in the playoffs.
As good as enough team. Like, they weren't as good as the Lakers. And if you go back a couple years ago, they weren't as good as the Warriors. And so if you're losing to better teams, I don't know that you can say that that's a failure. I think what caused this relationship to go sideways was after they had that incredible run and but for an injury to Chris Paul, lose in the 7th game of the conference final to Golden State.
It's crazy. Once again, that narrative is running like crazy, but everyone forgets that Andre Iguodala got hurt and was out game 3 and on. And Golden State was up 2-0. That whole series flipped after that.
He didn't get a contract extension. And at the time, he didn't have the plethora of opportunities that were out there like we have this year. And that's why I think once the season ended, I guarantee you his people have had conversations with some really good opportunities that have been created because of all the coaching firings over the last couple of weeks. And there is no doubt in my mind that he's going to be able to get one of those jobs that is probably considered a better job at this stage because of the lack of cap flexibility than the Houston Rockets.
I agree, in particular for the small market teams like OKC or Indiana, where their fans are going to come out, even though they may not have a chance to win a championship, but if they have a good brand of basketball, their ownership is going to be looking to get something like that where they can sell a lot of tickets during the regular season. Like I said, Mike D'Antoni, his owners love him because he creates a good regular season brand of basketball, and you can sell tickets on that.
3D, there's 6 jobs open right now, 5 if you obviously subtract the Rockets. What's next for Coach D'Antoni?
Well, to GA's point, I agree with you 100%. One thing about our league that if you have something in front of you and you've built it like he has in Houston, to GA's point, yes, he hasn't won a championship, but he's been there every year competing, trying to fight in the Western Conference. And GM Daryl Morey has given him a lot of different pieces. Sometimes they agree, sometimes they haven't. But I think some people will maybe criticize micro ball. But guys love playing for D'Antoni, period. Everywhere he's been, guys love to play for him. So that being said,
of course, guys love playing for him. He doesn't like to argue with players. This guy is non-confrontational. Of course, guys are going to love playing for him. They don't have to play no defense. It's just offense, offense, offense. And like D'Antoni loves to say, go, go, go.
question, yes, he will be a head coach somewhere in the NBA next year.
Looking forward to seeing where he lands. We all know that his offense is going to produce a lot of big numbers and a lot of threes.
With the most regular season wins without a finals appearance in NBA history, led by Don Nelson, but with Mike D'Antoni in third. So, guys, let me ask you this, and Grant.
You know, that list is funny because Don Nelson is another one of these finesse coaches, and he had a very good Dallas Mavericks team, I believe, in 2008, and they lost to the Golden State Warriors in the first round, an 8 seed they lost to. One of the few teams in the NBA as a first seed that lost to the 8 seed in the first round. And once again, one of these finesse coaches where they have a lot of issues with big men, especially players, big men like Don Nelson. He had issues with Patrick Ewing. But at the end of the day, their systems, they tend to not work in the postseason. But these guys are very good for owners that are looking to get ticket sales during the regular season to sell a good brand of basketball to their fans.
Start with you. It may be too simple to ask in this fashion.
Also, by the way, in this list, Rick Adelman, that's another coach. He used to coach the Sacramento Kings in the 2000s with Chris Webber. I believe he made the finals one time. He's one of these other guys that are sort of similar to Don Nelson and Mike D'Antoni.
What went wrong in Houston this season?
Well, you know, I think one of the things that happened, you brought in Russell Westbrook, and, you know, he's an unusual player, and certainly you ask him to play without the basketball, which is something he's never really done. But because he wasn't the three-point shooter that Houston likes to have, they had to make a trade, and they had to get rid of Capella, who I thought had really developed and nurtured under Mike D'Antoni and became a nice option at the rim, was a rim protector. He and Harden had great pick and roll chemistry. And obviously, it forced the defense to have to figure something out, which opened up shots for shooters on the perimeter. So you got rid of Capella, and now that
You mean Daryl Morey got rid of Capella?
Created opportunities in driving lanes for Westbrook, but it just wasn't quite the same. So, you know, D'Antoni obviously has fallen up, has come up short a number of times in the postseason with some really good teams. But this team was a little bit of an unusual team. I think they kind of,
because it was all analytically driven. Like I said, in the past 4 to 5 years, we've seen a lot of this. You could even look at the Memphis Grizzlies a few years ago. That Chandler Parsons Memphis Grizzlies team, the way that they were assembled, it had a lot of analytically driven guys, especially by that ownership in Memphis. That's a very tech-savvy guy. They believed in analytical only. A lot of MIT, a lot of Stanford guys was up there. And once again, that team was constructed horribly. And you've seen the results when the season started.
you know, went all in and tried something so unusual, and it didn't work. And so obviously I think D'Antoni saw the writing on the wall and decided to step down. But I was not a big fan of them losing Capella. I thought Capella, now for the Hawks, I was excited.
Yeah, I was about to say, really, because there's a billboard right by my house welcoming him here. You don't seem that disappointed. Yeah.
well, for all those great people in Atlanta, I'm happy
of course,
for them.
Yes.
But,
we're excited.
But
yeah.
for Houston, I didn't quite understand that move.
Yeah.
And certainly I think it was on full display against the Lakers how it didn't quite work out.
If it's not then D'Antoni in Houston, Jim, let me ask you, who do you think could be the right fit? Who would you like to see hired as head coach?
Well, whoever's going to get hired as the head coach, it's going to be a very small window of guys because they have to fit into Daryl Morey's vision of just going by the analytics. And there's going to be a lot of guys, especially guys who played already, you know, they're not going to want to go by those standards, especially guys who have scouting history and just played and overall have a different understanding from the game. Daryl Morey, once again, this guy's out of MIT. He doesn't really understand basketball outside of the numbers. He's very good at making negotiations for trades, but just his system just doesn't work. And also the ownership of the Houston Rockets, they're going to be very cheap into hiring a coach. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a first-time coach because he's not trying to spend money like that right now.
Houston?
Yes.
You know, that's a tricky question because you have to be able to hire someone that will allow Russell to be Russell, Harden to be Harden, but at the same time get the respect. I think if you rewind a little bit and you look at the troubles with this Houston team, you know, you had Chris Paul, it didn't work. You got Russell Westbrook, it kind of didn't work. But yet still, we're in a society now where we want things to happen right away. You never get a chance to mature what you have. So the challenge here with this Houston team is that you've broken it down to the finite beings of a small team. You don't have a lot of flexibility. You don't have draft picks. So how do you build it back up to be able to compete in the West? Even with, let's say, some of the coaching availability that's out there, what's the system? Because it's built so much on the analytics, and Grant knows this, is that Mike D'Antoni's system back when he was with Phoenix was built around a lot of off-screen ball movement, okay, pick and roll in the middle of the lane, a shooting big like Amari Stoudemire with a point guard that can shoot. So you have multiple options. This is not what we saw outside of maybe having Chris Paul run the point guard, but that wasn't the D'Antoni system. So it'll be very interesting with the coaching candidates out there.
You know, that's a very interesting point by Jim Jackson right there, because he definitely was part of that Phoenix Suns teams. So it seems like Mike D'Antoni had a versatile system, offensive system as far as scoring. And it seems like Daryl Morey's analytically driven system is just a one-way system that even kind of chokes Mike D'Antoni's system a bit. So right then and there, it'll be very interesting to see how this works out, because whoever they choose has to fit into that very narrow frame. And there's a lot of former players and just scouts and just people who have a different understanding of the game. They're not going to go by this type of analytically only driven system. And best believe the Golden State Warriors, their team was not built like that. They use analytics as a tool in their arsenal, but it wasn't the main tool. There's nothing wrong with analytics, but just having the way that Daryl Morey is using it, it's just, it doesn't produce championship winning basketball. It may produce a great product for an owner to sell tickets during the regular season, maybe make the playoffs, get eliminated the first round. But if you're trying to win a championship, that ain't it.
How they, one, retooled their roster, but two, what coach they use in this system that allow the Houston Rockets to be the best version of themselves.
It is what it is. We'll see what Daryl Morey does. The ownership doesn't really seem like they have his back like that. They're not going to probably let him go right now, because that owner is not trying to spend money like that, trying to find a new GM. But they have a very narrow window in their coaching selection and just even the way that they move as far as their cap flexibility. A lot of their cap is strap hold to James Harden, Russell Westbrook, each making over $45 million to 2023. And then they got Eric Gordon, who's on the downhill of his career, and he's making about $18 to $20 million off the bench. So we'll see what moves they make. It is what it is. You guys stay safe. Until next time, peace.